What's going on, guys? Welcome back to RC Everyday. This project got put on the back burner for a long time for one main reason. There were no tires and wheels that looked right for it. So, there'll be a link here above popping up for this build series, and there'll be a link below to WesMade. Wes Braswell, we did kind of a collaboration on this. I worked for Peterbilt for a while, and kind of wanted to do a Peterbilt Ratrod. And there's no 1/10 scale semi-truck stuff out there. So Wes does scratch built body styrene. Now he's doing vacuum forming stuff. And he made this hot rod chopped Peterbilt cab, rivets and everything. And he actually made this chassis as well. Bent the rails and made the fuel tank. And then sent it to me, and I was going to put in this diesel engine. Made the front axle. I'll cover more on that later. It's got a cool rear suspension. And yeah, no tires and wheels looked right on it. So it got put on the shelf for, it's been a couple years. We have tires now that are the right size, not the right color, but the ones that took off the Sin Racing truck, the F450, these are going to work. So I've got some stuff here. We've got to put this thing back together because being on the shelf for years, we've robbed from it, obviously. We'll cover more of the stuff, but if you're interested in this body fabrication, there'll be a link to that on Wes's channel below. And the previous videos, I'll have the little thing in the top corner, or it was earlier somewhere, I don't know. So, first thing we got to do, we've got one of these generic transmissions. We've got to reinstall one of those. We've got an RC 4-wheel drive axle missing a pin with a cool little skull. I don't remember what brand diff cover that was. We've got to put that back on. Then we've got to make these Sin Racing wheels work. When you buy the wheels, they're made to fit certain adapters. And I've got a whole set of fronts here. These are positive offset, and the ones for the rear are negative offset, but I got all fronts because I've widened this front axle, and I'll show you that. So this is one of the dropped axles that I use on the rat rods. It's a aftermarket version of the Tamiya 1/14 scale semi-axle. And this one I've chopped in half, and you use that 1/2-inch square tubing that I build most of my chassis out of. And yeah, just file the ends down, and those axle, when you cut it in the center, they slide right into it, so you can narrow it. We narrowed it on the Winnebago, the ramp truck. This one, we widened it, just used a longer piece of steel. Got it the width we needed. Put these in, clamped it, drilled holes all the way through, bolted it down, good to go. Because that is aluminum to steel, so we're just going to bolt those on. So we got the track width kind of where we want it, but with these big tires, I'm afraid we're going to hit the headlights. So that's another reason. I'm hoping these will be wide enough to bump it out to where they will not hit the headlights. Wes made that grill as well. That is a Peterbilt emblem from Garden Trucking, if I remember right. They have a lot of detailed 1/14 scale stuff. Other than that, the last thing I did on it was make the interior, or not make it, but paint it, because Wes had provided a dash and door panels. I made some interior panels wrapped in fabric that look okay. It's not amazing. And we have these seats. These are the awesome design Ratrod bomber seats that Jason made up for me quite a while ago as well. They've been around since the number 3 Ratrod. I redid some foams for it in the fabric that we did the interior. Thought that would be a nice contrast. This thing is still dusty, but it is shiny. We have a whole lot of rattle can metal flake, and it looks pretty good. I really need to go through it and dust it out pretty well. But when Wes sent me this, we got pre-cut windows. We've got a couple little detail pieces that we need to attach the exhaust. Let me show you the other side real quick. So the exhaust, this engine, it was designed for this. As far as dimensions go, we've got our downpipe basically, and all we got to do is connect this down to here. We've got another elbow that size. It won't be as pretty painted stainless looking, but it'll work. And yeah, so this is all kind of tentative still. We got to see how this works, see how the width of the axle works with the hub adapters, works with the steering and the headlights. We still have to fabricate mounts for the engine. That is I know everybody's going to ask, That engine is a die-cast model, or it comes in a little plastic glass box. The only thing I remember about it, here it says Weichai, W-E-I-C-H-A-I. Says that all over it. These, I've never gotten the same one twice. The one we had on number 2, Ratrod, was a lot nicer looking, and I've never seen it available again. I find these on eBay in the die-cast collectibles category. So with your 1/24 scale NASCARs and things like that, and it's terrible to search on eBay because you search die-cast diesel engine, the majority of your search is going to be scale trains, locomotives, diesel engines. And it took me forever filtering through eBay, checking things periodically to find these diesel engines, and there has not been many on there lately. That Cat engine that Semi-Joe's sells is similar. It's not quite as detailed as some of these, but it is about the same price. These were about $114 or so. I thought I had another one up here. I do have another one on the shelf. This is how they all come in this little box, little display. You can see this is a very different style engine. Typically like these better, but this was, there wasn't very many on there. A lot of detailed parts. We've got rubber belts, the pulleys spin on all of them. Not very well, but the reason this one went for this project is the turbo is on this side. This looks more like a more modern deal, like we actually use at Peterbilt these days. The single piece valve cover. I like these because they kind of mimic the 12 valve Cummins, because you've got individual caps on each cylinder or each valve train. But that is all I know about these. So, you know, if you want to comment below and post links to help other people find them, that's where I get them. It's been years since I bought one, and I've been sitting on these for a while. So I don't know what's out there currently, and I'm not really looking for any more at the moment. So that'll get you all caught up to speed here. This body does just slide off. WesMade a nice little plate. We've got our mount for that scale transmission in there. I actually robbed this one out of this truck to put in the Winnebago. After the one I bought for the Winnebago, when I built it, I messed it up. Put an extra washer in it and messed up some gears. So we're going to replace that and start looking at the rear suspension. I don't know if I ever had a drive shaft in here, but we can make something work. I've got lots of drive shaft pieces. So yeah, let's get started. Alright guys, so we got the rear on. It's a really neat setup that Wes did. He was going to make me the body, and he ended up doing the chassis, and that's part of the reason why this build got kind of slow-tracked, because there's nothing wrong with anything he did at all. It's great work. I love it. But my mind, I just can't wrap my head around the suspension geometry and the layout of the chassis because I didn't design it. And it's just kind of messed me up for so long. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with this. This suspension is brilliant. And then this shackle system he made in the rear, I'm not exactly sure. I think those are, to me, a semi-truck front shock mounts. And then we just have a standard shackle. And it works great with this. So we may have to add a spring or something depending on the final weight of the truck and everything. But that when you start building stuff from scratch, things like that kind of just block your mind. And it kind of messed with me for a while. The original plan was he was going to do the body and I was going to make the chassis. And, I have my set way of doing things and he has a different way of doing things. And it's just kind of been a challenge to overcome. But, yeah, here we are, overcoming. It's setting crooked. That's just the way the body is setting because we don't have the front suspension on yet. Once you pick up on the front end, it does level out. Made one crucial mistake. I didn't even think about it. I don't have all the hardware for these wheels and tires. I reused the hardware on the Sin truck when I swapped those over. And I don't have but a few odds and ends. These I think are 2.5 mil for these adapters. And yeah. So, got a few things on there. I may eventually order some scale hardware for those, maybe some spike bolts or something. I think maybe some spike lug nuts would look cool on there. And I also didn't think about it. I put the center caps on the wheels with the hub adapters, and I didn't put the nut on, mount it to the axle yet. So I had to take those off, and I just bolted it all together without the center caps for now because we're still mocking everything up. So those tires and wheels are probably going to come off a few more times, make it easier. One big problem I've got, not super big problem, but a problem, the wheel nut, is not into the nylon. So with these deep spacers on the rear and having two duals on there, having dual wheels, these are the front hub adapters. They were out of stock on the rears, but I knew I was going to need a little more space in there. So my wheel nut is not on the nylon. So we're going to have to find a different kind of nut for that. Or if you use a standard, I've done this before, I think on the Volksrod, take a standard wheel nut and run it backwards so your nylon is first. Then you don't have to worry about it backing off as much. Yeah, I'm digging the width of it. It's massive. It looks ridiculous. I love it. The front now, we're going to move up here and start looking. We're going to have a couple obstacles up here in the front. The headlights, again, like I mentioned, I've kind of mocked this up. I don't want to reverse these and have them sticking out that far because then it looks like a four-wheel drive buggy that's... So we're going to hit the headlights. But I've also taken the shocks off of here. I robbed those for something else. And I've got another set here. These are Tamiya Grand Hauler shocks. And I had them mounted like so and mounted into there with some spacers. We may have to move the front axle further forward. Right now we are using 129 millimeter RC four-wheel drive rods. And I honestly don't think I have anything longer than that. The way I do the shocks, I usually put them in between the rod and the axle, run a longer bolt. The axles are usually only threaded on one side. I've gotten some before that weren't threaded at all. I've gotten some that were threaded all the way through. It's kind of a crapshoot. You need some long bolts, and we can space that out further. I would prefer to put longer rods on it because the Ratrod style, you want the giant radius arm. This is as far back as we can mount them. The holes are nice and even from side to side. So there's really no other option at this point because the chassis is already made. We can't put the halves together, clamp them, and drill evenly from side to side. I wouldn't trust myself being able to drill with the equipment I have a nice even hole. So we've got to move that tire forward. Really, we need about an inch. So we're going to have to get creative. The hubs, let me show you how I'd get around this. I've had a lot of questions about this. So on one of the Ratrods, don't remember which, there are 3D printed spacers out there that fit a 5 by 114 by 3 bearing, standard size that these axles are made to work with on all semi-truck axles or wheels. And I have that, and I don't know what it was. They were printed in the extra fine quality stuff from Shapeways, and there's a lot of slop in there. It actually could probably fit a larger, probably a 5 by 116 by 3 bearing, which I'm sure is out there, but they just didn't fit right. So what I do, just got a standard RC 4-wheel drive 12 millimeter hex, and it has been drilled out in the center to fit this, which is, I broke my micrometer the other day. This is right at 5 millimeter, that shaft. So I've just drilled these out to a 5 mil. I don't remember what size standard drill bit that was because it's been years. But, you know, close is close. And I've got a little brass bushing in here, but we are going to have to change that on this because once we slide all this on and then we put our adapter on, the adapter is not as large a diameter in the middle. So we're going to have to drill this out to 5 millimeter as well. And that will pull it in, but there's always a but with this stuff. If we do that, then that will allow this to completely tighten on and not spin. So we have to hope that we can get the nylon on the lock nut. Yay, I said a word. The nylock on the nut to actually bite. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to keep the wheel from locking up. You can Loctite the snot out of them and hope it stays, but realistically, the way this works, I mean, it's not perfect. Your wheel is going to wobble a little on the shaft. The shaft wobbles a little bit in the axle. I mean, there's always enough tolerance in there to create some slop. That's just the nature of the scale of this hardware. When you get up to real car size, then there's less slop in things because the tolerances are tighter because they're larger. But at 10th scale stuff, 8th scale stuff, whatever we actually are, 14th scale stuff here, there's going to be a lot of slop. So I don't know, we're just going to have to roll the dice on that and see where we end up. But for first, we've got to figure out how to lengthen this front end a little bit. So I'm going to go through all my rods and rod ends and all of that stuff and go from there. Alright guys, so work through some of those issues. Had to get creative. So I said I had 129mm rods on there. I needed a lot longer. I don't have any longer. Those are the longest ones I've got because that is the size that I use on number 2. That is my standard front length, but this is a larger truck than I'm used to. So, got creative in there. Let me get you a closer look at that. So what I did, I put about an 8mm spacer, a 100mm rod, and that put my shocks perfectly parallel with the mount. The angle is all off, and we're going to have to adjust that because this will not hold the weight of anything. So the front wheel set lower, but we've got to get those shocks more vertical. But the location is good. So we've got a 100mm rod. These are the RC4 Drive M3 scale Heim joints. I don't know if they're still available. I've had those for a while, and they are expensive, but they do look more realistic, but they do have the same amount of slop as all the rod ends, unfortunately. And then we have a RC4 Drive short rod end on the bottom of the Tamiya shock. That's probably 5 or 6mm. And then I have a 40mm RC4 Drive rod after that. So you saw I put one of the long rod end M3 studs, I guess you call them. I don't know what you call them, but they have been my saving grace through a lot of the Ratrod projects. And Loctited both sides of that and got them real nice and snug. So basically the way these rods are, when you do that kind of stuff, they can't spin. They can rock just a little bit based off the rod end here, but they can't move. They're locked in with a nut on, or a screw on this side. They're locked into the thread of that rod end. They're going to stay put. So you can extend two together like that. As long as you have enough thread in both halves, you're good. You saw I had some issues getting the thread to stay put. The Loctite hadn't tightened yet on the 100mm side. I had to kind of hold them with some needle nose and do that. But we have at least 8 to 10mm of thread in each rod through that shock, so it should be stout. There's not going to be any give. We've done similar things. The farm truck there in the background, its rear shocks are mounted in that fashion, and I had too short a stud in there. Those are plastic rod ends, and it did break at one point, and I had to just cut down larger bolts and make my own M3 stud to fit in there. So, not sure what we're going to do on the front crossmember yet. I've got the tires just on there, mocked up. We do clear the headlights now, even under suspension travel, which is minimal, but it's plenty. I think the extra length kind of fits the look. This thing is huge. It needed to be longer, and that really kind of sets it off. Typical Ratrod problem, steering. I don't know what to do. I know everybody wants to see the cantilever type radius arm, or whatever you call it. I don't even remember. It's late. The arm that comes out of the firewall of the vehicle. There's just no way to do that. Even with this axle widened, you see we have absolutely no clearance. We'd have to have the arm barely clear the headlight. When the suspension would move, it would hit the headlight. Those headlights are where they look best. It's the most aesthetic location, the height on the grille frame and everything like that. So there's not really a way around that. It's just not going to work. So the servo is going to have to be up front somewhere. I'm thinking, since we have all this new space between the grille shell and the front axle, that maybe we can make a nice little compact panel to hide a servo under and just have the arm stick up out of it and connect to one side or the other and give us what we need. But that will involve brazing or welding, and we're not doing that tonight because it is late, and I just want to get this thing back rolling, get the motivation back. Same with the motor mounts. We've got to do some kind of fabrication on that. The motor sits perfect on this crossmember that Wes had in here. The transmission mount sits there, so we need something in the front to support it. We have those stock locations on the motor itself. Those are screwed in from the inside. I've taken some of these apart before. It's not fun. They never go back the same. So we'll have to see how we can overcome that. And then we also going to have to change the front shock mount. We're probably going to have to remove the grill and just go ahead and weld on something new. So this is going to be a pretty big project, but